Welcome to the Career Ready podcast. Learn about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interviewing, and all things you need to be career ready with the Career Service Center at College of DuPage. I'm your host, Pierre Michiels. For today's episode, I'm honored to have Julio Rodriguez with me. Julio is the Deputy Director of the Office of Employment and Training with the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. He has great insight to share about the job market and resources offered through Illinois. Julio, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited about being able to share at least some of the information that I have regarding workforce and some of my experience. I've been in the field of workforce for over 25 years, so I've been at it a bit.
Yeah, and just kind of looking at some of the stuff that you're doing, I know there's a lot of great information you have to share. But before we really get into that, can you share a quick introduction, or as we would like to say, your elevator pitch?
Sure. So again, my name is Julio Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Employment and Training at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And I oversee part of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act workforce programs. Those are federal programs. Specifically oversee what we call the Title I program. And that program serves adults what we call dislocated workers, which are workers that have lost their jobs by no fault of their own, and then youth between the ages of 14 and 24. Our primary sort of work is really centered around providing career services, case management, and opportunities to get training into a variety of different sectors and occupations that we see opportunities for growth and for living wages. The other things that we do is we focus very heavily on what are the right types of strategies to get people's in careers. And we've really been focused a lot in the last few years on pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. And I'm happy to say the state of Illinois under Governor Pritzker has been one of the leading states in that space. And we continue to grow that program. And DuPage, the College of DuPage, has been an excellent partner with us, and we have been very, very happy that the College of DuPage and other community colleges, as well as our local workforce areas, have really led the way in our ability to be able to be one of the top states in that space.
Well, I'm really excited for this conversation based off that introduction. Obviously, this is what I'm passionate about, being here in career services. Uh, but all those things you're working on has a lot of value, and I'm excited that you get to share some of this with our listeners.
Sure, I'm excited too.
So as we get started here, can you just explain a little bit how the Office of Employment and Training identifies trends in the job market and how you determine the needs for training and reskilling?
Yes. So we work with a number of state partners. The Illinois Department of Employment Security has a unit which is dedicated to labor market information. So they, along with many of the states, work with businesses and with the federal government to determine where do we see growth. They look at a number of different factors. Then we also work internally with our business development community and with the folks who are responsible reaching out to businesses. And through both those mechanisms, we are able to compile data that really tells us what we see as trends as it relates to various sectors. An example is, Illinois has always been seen as a very big manufacturing state, and that continues to be true. In fact, I think one of our challenges is sort of fighting the myths that, manufacturing is dead in Illinois. In fact, manufacturing is actually growing. It continues to advance. We see new forms of manufacturing. I think that's really what trending helps to do, and then the analysis is showing how a sector is evolving and changing. And so what you're seeing in a lot of sort of the manufacturing space is the adoption of more technology. And seeing both automation, the implementation of AI, and a variety of different things that continue to make that sector not only a place for opportunity, but a real exciting sector to be in. It's not the old factory where the dirty floors and, it's now the last time I was in a manufacturing center, I was amazed at how not only sleek and really modern they looked, but also just the application of so much technology in the space.
Before being here at College of DuPage, I used to work in a high school system helping high school students on their career journey. Luckily, I don't have to deal with the parents as much anymore. But a lot of parents at that time would be very adamant their child wasn't going to go into a manufacturing setting because they just saw it as like dirty, hard work. But it
Uh-huh.
has really evolved and changed. So I like hearing what you're saying and, really identifying that manufacturing is strong. That's good to hear.
Mhm.
But it's probably very different than how a lot of people perceive it.
Yeah. And we have a program at DCO called Made in Illinois, where we highlight actually specific manufacturers across the state. And and I think people forget that manufacturing is really the bread and butter of a lot of things. If you think about so many products that sit at your kitchen table or in your car or in a variety of different settings, and if it wasn't for, the robust and diverse manufacturing sector that we have in Illinois, we would not be, and we're a world leader, really. We're not just a leader in the country, but we're also a world leader in that space. To give you another example of sort of an evolving industry, right now, quantum. Even though people really people hear the word quantum and they're sort of scratching their head trying to figure out, well, what does that really mean? But it really is in some ways. Bringing technology and science to a new sort of generation of thinking. The power of technology to advance the use of data to solve problems is really how I look at quantum. And then the jobs are not just jobs for people with like PhD, but there are jobs for technicians, for people who will manufacture the computer. So there's a whole ecosystem within quantum that I think people sometimes don't realize. It's kind of like when you go to a hospital. My hospital happens to be Rush. When I go into Rush, I feel like I've entered an ecosystem because there's so many jobs that are interrelated and so connected that landing in a place like Rush opens up a wide door of both clinical opportunities, but as well as supportive opportunities. And I think sometimes we look at these sort of structures and don't peek in. That's why I think one of the things that you were saying as a high school counselor, we really have to get more and more of our schools to open the doors to business and business to open their doors to allow young people to see the possibilities. I mean, I think it's very, I think when I was in high school, there was very, very little opportunities that people talked to me about career services. Now, mind you, this was the 70s, but even to those days, I was working by the time I was 14. But that was really on my own volition. That wasn't because someone sort of helped me navigate that. I think back now that if I had had somebody like you, who knows where I would have wound up if I had been given, varying choices and the ability to sort of get into those choices and try to see what made the most sense for me. Not that I'm not happy. I love government and I love the work that I do, but I think that's one of the things that we have to do, not only in high school, but as early as elementary school, exposing young people to what's available right around the corner. DuPage is an exciting county because literally there's so much happening there in terms of economic development. But I bet you the average high school kid has no idea like what's there and what's in front of them. You know.
Yeah, so many possibilities, and just being able to gain a little bit of exposure at a time goes a long way.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about the workforce here, just as globally, we've seen a lot of changes over the last few years.
Mhm.
And that has really changed the landscape of work. Some of it is probably permanent. Some of it is like regressing back to what it was before, and others are going to be like an in-between type of area. So just from what you've seen, what do you think the job market will look like or the workforce will look like in the future? What from these recent changes are really going to be sticking around?
Right. Well, I think COVID had a huge impact, right? So one of the changes that I think that we're seeing that I think is continuing to evolve is the whole idea of hybrid, right? What does it mean to not do the traditional 9 to 5 job? Although one could argue whether that was actually really true. You know, I think the 70s and 80s and 90s, we really started to see a trend where people were opting to work different schedules. You would see employers setting up different shifts. So I think that the workforce and the workplace has been evolving over the years, but certainly with the advent of COVID, that was sort of change on steroids, if you will. And what we're seeing now, I think, is one, employers trying to figure out the right balance between, you know, uh, wanting workers on site and their ability to offer workers greater flexibility. So I think that's one significant change. And what does that mean? And for those workers who are more front facing, how can we do that? A good example, I think, is if you look at telehealth. It used to be, making an appointment with your doctor, then the nurse. Just recently, I saw my doctor through a screen just like this. And for what we were doing, that was actually my preferred. I didn't have to get in my car. I didn't have to worry about parking, and quite frankly, there was more efficiency in our ability to interact in that way. It doesn't take away the fact that obviously there'll be times when I want to see him in person, where there'll be tests, where there'll be conversation, but the ability to have that option and imagine it for a single mom who has multiple kids, if there are ways to simplify her ability to get services or products in a way that allows her to be able to use her time more effectively, I think that's where we're moving. I think industry is really trying to figure out how do you manage the workforce and still get your customers the products and services that they need. So I think the other trend you're going to see is sort of this partnering with technology. So how do we use technology and things like AI in particular to augment our services? I just saw a very interesting product, and you would be interested in this as somebody who did career services, where this company has developed a program that creates avatars of young people, and those young people facilitate job clubs in high schools. But it's kids that kids know. And so it makes the interactions much more natural. They've seen better participation, a better way to also engage young people in a way that uses the technology to better speak to them, but that also allows the counselor a way then to better assess and evaluate how those young people are engaging with information. So I think there's the other big trend that we're going to see in the future is the utilization of technology in a variety of different workplaces. Um, the other trend I think that we're seeing is trying to determine really what does uh, the world of work sort of look like. And I think that's still a very open question, right? I have many colleagues who live in one state but work for a company in another state. So, this sense of place has very much changed. And so I think we will see that continue to expand. The other thing that I think we will see more of is this sort of sense that you don't necessarily work for a traditional employer in sort of this sort of very kind of regimented way, but instead you're sort of a contract employee in which you provide a set of services that you're compensated for. I mean, we see that now with consulting works, right? Consultants. I see that model being applied in a variety of different settings. And you already see it in healthcare, you already see it in technology, but I think you're going to see that model applied in a variety of other sectors as the economy continues to grow and change. And we try to figure out how do you get the best talent um, to be able to deliver the products and services you want. Stuff. And I think for workers, it gives them greater flexibility. And you hear a lot about work-life balance. And I think that's what both industry and workers are looking for, right? What's the right amount of um, hours required in order to deliver a product and service and still have the quality of life that you want so you can enjoy, the income that you're earning and not feel the stress and the pressure of having to be someplace when that doesn't necessarily lend itself to being more productive. I think we're seeing that within government. I think we're seeing it in a lot of other industries. So those are some of the trends I think that we're going to be seeing. Um, and obviously, globalization is continuing to happen, and you're going to see, I think, more and more, just engagement of countries across borders, and more of those borders will be more flexible, especially as it relates to work.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things to mull over there. Some things that really stuck out to me, though, again, being in this career space, the idea of the gig economy.
Hmm.
And, we tend to think of that as like small side jobs, but now you're talking about that evolving to be more professional work
Hmm.
and, the gig economy really expanding into that area, which, I haven't really thought much about, but it makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And, I think maybe people are going to become a lot more used to that because they're used to growing up and doing gig jobs
Hmm.
to help go through school, and then that's how they progress through their career.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because I think more and more folks are, and I would say this is true for young people, but I would also say this is true for older workers as well. It's how do you navigate, right? Wanting to do a particular profession, but do it in a way that allows you greater flexibility and the greater opportunity to advance and excel without compromising the things that you like to do, right?
Mhm.
I, I think the gig economy, most people don't even realize it. When you think about the arts, the entertainment industry, that has been a gig economy for quite some time.
Yeah.
If you think about the hospitality food industry, very much sometimes a gig economy. Even in government and human services, we often don't think about that. In many programs, somebody's working under a contract from a funding source. And so in some ways one could say they're not an employee of the organization, but they're a contractor of the organization.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is then what's the right benefit package? So then it comes back down to then how do we provide the sort of those benefits that ensure that workers are protected, that workers have access to health care, that their families have access to health care, that they have opportunities to continue to grow by providing educational benefits that allow workers to actually advance. I think the other trend that we're trying to do is get employers in particular to see the advantage of growing your own. And that's why, again, as I said earlier, that's why I think pre-apprenticeships or apprenticeships are very exciting. It gives employers the opportunity to really grow their talent and to figure out what's the right set of skills that an individual needs to do the job and to continue to advance. I think the traditional sort of 4-year degree is not disappearing, but I think we're seeing more ways to acquire a set of skills or competencies outside of the traditional way. And how can employers help support that? How can the education system, how can government, how can we all work together to create a menu that allows people to sort of dabble in what feels right for them and to sort of what we call go on and off ramps, right? So you
Yeah.
might leave high school, go right into an apprenticeship, but then a year later, you're in an associate's program. Then you come off of that, then you work a few more years, and then you decide, I want to advance. I'm going to go on and get my bachelor's degree or beyond that. But the idea is it's not this sort of regimented path, but it allows people choices and flexibility and gives employers the talent they need at the time that they need it. And it allows them to continue to cultivate that talent as they go forward.
So that gets me hits on a lot of another question I wanted to ask. So we hear about the skills-based hiring and how
Mhm.
that's becoming more of a trend. So you've kind of maybe hit on this already or a little bit there, but can you just expand on like how does that skill-based hiring impact credential attainment in today's job market?
Yeah, I think what employers are the realization I think that's happening for many employers is the traditional model of requiring people to have certain credentials doesn't always translate to having the skills that they need to be able to do the job. So I think what we're seeing is employers are really beginning to sort of adopt and adapt to the idea of are there certain competencies that if a person comes in the door with, you can then augment with additional education and training. But are there a set of skills? And I will say there are sort of four primary ones that we've been hearing through research and through conversations with employers. The ability to problem solve. It seems like a simple thing, but sometimes I always say some of my smartest friends can sometimes not solve the simplest problems. You know, and I think people minimize what do we mean by ability to problem solve. It really is the ability to sort of analyze, look at a situation and really weigh your options, right? It's not as simple as just seeing something and fixing it. It's really, really stepping back and being intentional about how you look at a problem. Third thing is, how do you actually apply learning? So if you have knowledge, how are you able to apply that knowledge in a very concrete kind of way? So that ability to not only to have a skill, but also apply it in a way that makes sense for whatever you're applying that skill to. Um, Third is the ability to work in teams, the ability to not, and, we sometimes, and I know right now the sort of environment is sort of, uh, has taken the idea of people being able to work together, understand each other's journeys to how they get to be who they are. People have sort of couch sat in a lot of negativity, but I think employers still firmly believe that your ability to get along with people that don't look like you, who come from a different place, speak differently, have other abilities that are different than your own, that ability to work with a multitude of individuals with these varying degrees of difference, I think makes for a much stronger worker and also increases the productivity in the workplace. So it's the idea of working in a team and understanding not only what you bring to it, the work, but how do the other people in the team are assets to getting the job done and being able to identify that. And I think the last thing is really about what we call emotional intelligence. And that's really the ability to not only be aware of how other people interact in a given situation and how they manage the work and circumstances, but how do you do that? Your own self-awareness. I think, there's very little opportunities in life for you to sort of self-reflect on how you actually engage with others. You know, um, I think going back, high school is is always the sort of petri dish, if you will, for experimenting. Um, but if you think about your high school experiences, and for many young people, you should be learning more about how you manage relationships to make that experience be fully what it could be. I think we don't teach young people early on about self-awareness, knowing, their strengths and their weaknesses, knowing what pushes them both positively and negatively, but that whole idea of understanding who you are in the context of, your immediate peer group, the people around you, your family and others, and how you navigate various, types of interactions. But I think that's what employers are looking for, right? They're looking for individuals that can really, not only work in a team, but can manage their own emotions, their own skills, the ability to, apply the skills that they have in a concrete way. And then I think this sort of sense of, um, a self-starter that you can really guide yourself in a way that helps you be the most productive that you can be. And I think those sort of less tangible skills are the kinds of things that employers are seeing that I can then train you to do any other thing if those fundamental skills are there. And I think that's what we're going to see moving forward is these less sort of um, these more foundational skills or competencies that really allow you to work in almost any environment. Um, and I think the people who are going to be the most successful are those that really have those qualities, because you can be taught and trained to do a variety of different things, as long as you have the ability to learn.
Yeah, those are great skill sets. I like hearing that our audience should hopefully be familiar with these if they're regular listeners, because we bring a lot of what you mentioned up regularly as being able to better present yourself and these foundational, fundamental competencies. We talk about the transferable skills, right? No matter what industry field they're going into, these are things that they're going to bring to the table, and the employer can fill in some of those gaps in those specific needs.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess kind of along those lines of filling gaps and getting more specific to some things that your office is doing, how does the office help workers prepare for the shifting labor market?
Yeah. I think one of the things is, I didn't say this earlier, but so we have a network of what we call local workforce areas. There are 22 in the state of Illinois. One of them is actually DuPage County. And through our local workforce area there, that center, we have what we call our Illinois WorkNet centers or one-stop centers. Their counselors are trained to not only help you navigate sort of career information, but they're also helping you think about what are the kinds of things that most make sense for you to pursue. So really assessing your abilities and your sort of choices and desires as it relates to your skill set, and really trying to put you on a path that makes sense. And again, going back to apprenticeships, for many people who especially are trying to change careers or are just starting a career, being able to sort of learn and earn at the same time. For many college students, college debt is a reality. So being able to get hired from the get-go and be earning a wage while you're also learning the job and acquiring a credential, I think is both very attractive to the individual, but also very attractive to an employer because it allows you to begin to think about how do you set the workplace so that you can really develop your talent, not only in the short term, not for your immediate hiring, but how do you help those folks progress so that you build a much more loyal workforce and a workforce that really can continue to evolve and adapt as your company or in your industry grows. I think one of the things in the past that we, did that was really detrimental to all of us is that we hired folks and sort of that was it. It's like you've got a job, that's all you need to worry about. And I think that really did a disservice not only to the individual, but also to the company because it didn't allow you to cultivate those individuals in a way that would help you expand and grow your company. And I think we're seeing employers shift now in terms of how they do that. And I think our local workforce areas and the funding that we provide to them helps them to really help people not only know what the trends are and what the data is telling us, but also helps them think about it as it applies to them, you know. And sometimes people have a hard time hearing, you know, that the thing that they think they want to do really doesn't fit with actual what they like to do. You know, I'll give an example. You know, years back, one of our biggest challenges that we would graduate a lot of nurses in Illinois. And within the first year or two, many of them would leave the profession. And often at times was because they really didn't have an understanding of what that work would look like on a day-to-day basis. So I think the other thing that we're trying to do is expose folks to what does a job look like. So using things like virtual reality, you know, to simulate a workplace. A lot of our local workforce areas are exploring the utilization of that technology, especially with young people or folks that are new to the workplace. So, you know, you put that headset on, and I'm amazed at how I actually worked on a plane using a headset and, you know, and to say I am a neophyte when it comes to mechanics is an understatement. But it was so real to me. And now the University of Southern Illinois is using that technology as part of their overall aviation mechanics program. But that's an example of what our local workforce areas are doing to expose people who come to us looking for a career or looking to change a career or working with young people to really expose them to not only the options that exist, but how they can explore those options in a variety of different ways, either through technology, through apprenticeship programs, through on-the-job learning, to work-based learning within high schools. But the idea is let's expose folks to the work before they get there so that it turns out to be the right fit, you know. And sometimes people, you know, they chase the number and then they don't realize that the number won't change the fact that either they're not qualified for the job or that that job isn't a good fit for what they want to be doing long term. So,
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties back into something you were mentioning earlier, as far as that self-reflection, right? That's what I bring up a lot, as far as, you know, just exploring paths and then being successful in the job search. You have to know your skills, your abilities, so you could present that to the employer. But gaining this exposure, and I love hearing the incorporation of technology to gain that exposure, right? Because if you can go and actually see a site, it gives you a much better understanding of what that world of a nurse is, or whatever setting it looks like. But you can't always make it into a doctor's office and actually see it, right?
right.
There's laws that prevent you from just being able to do that.
Right. Right.
But to have virtual introduction to that can really help create that understanding. So it's great to hear that is being incorporated in some of these offices. So you talked a lot about the offices, but are there other like programs or initiatives that you want listeners to be aware of as resources?
Yes. So we have a portal called IllinoisWorkNet.com. And that's the statewide portal. It's free to every resident of Illinois. In fact, it's free to anybody who's interested in coming to Illinois or relocating and learning about what opportunities exist in Illinois. That platform is in the process of being upgraded again. It is a cloud-based platform, but it provides resources not only in terms of our local workforce areas, but what are the educational opportunities that exist in your particular area. It allows you to do searches. So if you're interested in a particular occupation and you don't know much about it, it has a whole career navigation. It has videos on it. that allows you to walk through like the various options that you might have. Um, it has specific information for people with disabilities, reentry, veterans. It connects those folks to services that exist for specific populations. And then it also allows you to update your resume, do some, mock interviews. It's a very robust system, and it's something that you don't have to enroll into a program in order to access. So I really want to encourage people to visit IllinoisWorkNet.com. All of our local areas are connected to it, but it is a tremendous resource, and it's one that we continue to improve and advance in terms of that technology. Um, but I think the other things that we're doing is we're trying very much to put out more resources for the expansion of apprenticeship programs. We recently received funding from the U.S. Department of Labor, so we're going to continue to work with employers and with our local workforce areas, our community colleges, and our community-based organizations that do training to really get more and more people into a track of apprenticeships because we see them as a great opportunity. Again, especially for folks where access to training doesn't afford them the ability to actually be able to participate because they really do need to be earning a wage and to be earning an income while being able to advance and be able to get the skills that they need to continue to pursue a career path. But I think those are some of the tools and resources that we have. And again, through our local workforce areas, they provide everything from on-the-job training to training subsidies for folks wanting to pursue a specific career. If you have lost a job, we have services for folks who specifically have lost their jobs and reconnecting them. To your earlier point about doing that sort of bridge between the job you had and the job you might want to pursue, working with a counselor to try to figure out what those options might look like, working with employers to develop, specialized classes, either through a community college or through a business association. So there's a variety of different ways that our local workforce areas can help individuals and employers really build a talent pool. The one last thing I will say is one of the things that Illinois is leading on is this thing called, it was developed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and it's called Talent Pipeline Management. And what it does is it works with leaders in a specific sector or industry to really determine not only their short-term talent needs, but what are their long terms. So it's everything from looking at what does your current workforce look like? Like, where do you currently get talent? Where do you currently source it? To what are you doing with high schools in your community to begin to expose them to the types of job that your sector or industry has to offer? Um, and this six element process really helps employers really figure out how they build an ecosystem for their industry and really begin to look at a pipeline, similar to how you would develop a product, right? You
Hmm.
think about what's the product, how do you get it, how do you manufacture it? We are now applying that same set of supply chain management to talent and to workforce. And I think we're very excited. We're leaning into that, and we're a state that's really leading that. And the US Chamber has recognized Illinois as a state that's really using that model in a way that's very effective to engaging employers and getting our employers to really build ecosystems and not just, a transactional system. We need to move away from this sense of, hire, fire, rehire, but the idea of you're building talent and you're investing in it. And I think that is one of the other things is how do we get employers to invest more in the public system so that we're all growing the talent together. Uh, so.
Yeah, I like to hear that. That's something that I really am passionate about. It relates to community colleges, because we hear from employers sometimes of, oh, we only recruit from the four-year schools. And I think that has been shifting because they realize that they can be building those strong relationships with community college students. So then before they go off to the four-year schools, they may not be doing internships at those locations with those companies yet, but at least they're building up those relationships for that long-term recruitment, that full ecosystem as you were talking about.
Yeah. And I think the Department of Commerce specifically, one of the top, we've been rated one of the top relocation sites. I know people, the news always focuses on, oh, Illinois is losing businesses, Illinois is losing people. But the reality is it's an ebb and flow, right? And I think one of the things that has been remarkable is Site Selection Magazine has rated Illinois one of the top states in the Midwest for companies to relocate. And I think we need to get that message out, especially to young people, and especially young people in, non-urban settings, that if you're at University of Illinois or another university, there's great opportunity in Illinois. So while California and the East Coast might be attractive for some reasons, this is a state that can really provide great opportunity. The cost of living in Illinois is still much lower than it is in many other states. You have great recreational, great opportunities to grow a family here. You have a great, economic engine with the metro, Chicago area. But areas like the East St. Louis area, those areas continue to expand. Southern Illinois continues to expand. We're going to see huge gains in clean energy as the governor's, goal to make Illinois one of the top leaders as it relates to renewable energies and moving away from sort of traditional sort of fossil fuels. But I think, again, Illinois is an innovator. Department of Commerce continues to reach out to employers talking about the talent we have. We have a great education system, as you well know. And the education system is beyond just our universities. It's our community colleges, it's our vocational programs. There's just so much in the environment for an employer who wants to come to some place and really grow. I think Illinois is well poised to be that place. So.
Well, I love to hear that. A question I wanted to ask you, and I think you just answered this because it made me hopeful for the future. So, like, what is hopeful for the workforce development in Illinois? You just shared a lot there. So I'll just kind of leave it at, is there anything else you want to share, either from that hopeful perspective or just for our listeners to be aware of as we wrap up here?
Yes. So I know that for many of us, obviously COVID is still with us and we continue to sort of navigate that along with a host of other, things that are happening within our society, things that are sometimes outside of our control. But I do really firmly believe, at least in this state, that we are moving in the right direction. We're making investments, not just in the area of workforce, but early education. The fact that the governor has made, early childhood education one of the principal things. We want to invest up and down the pipeline from as early as we can to making sure that someone who's thinking about retirement, we we actually give them pause and say, hey, maybe there's something else I could do. Maybe I can become an entrepreneur and a manufacturer because I've always wanted to do this. I think the idea is that lifelong learning is something that we in this state, I think, really are working towards in workforce. So people feel like they're never going to be stuck, that there are options and there are choices, and that we will continue to make this state one that has an ecosystem that feels like it's always innovative and always evolving. And that no matter what happens in other places, Illinois will always be a great place to work and to live. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Sometimes when I have the future of the workforce and what we're seeing right now, I don't always feel so confident and happy as I do with this conversation. So I really appreciate your perspective, your insight on what's going on here in Illinois and the resources available to our listeners. So again, thank you for this great insight. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for this podcast. If you do have questions for us, you can submit it to careerpodcast@cod.edu or on social media @COD Career Center, and you may hear it answered in a future episode.